What's going on, everybody? Extra Dough with JD, episode 5. Very special episode here. We're talking Heisman Trophy betting odds. Really excited to get into it. Won't be anything too crazy, right? I'm going to be talking about who I think is going to win the award. I'm going to be covering the favorites. I'm going to talk about why I like their odds, why I don't like their odds, or whether it seems about right. And then I'll hit on a few long shots. I don't think spending too much time on long shots is wise, because usually Heisman betting it's somewhat simple. It's kind of like college football itself, right? In college football, it can seem somewhat predictable because you know who's at the top, right? Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson. It's no mystery. It's somewhat similar with the Heisman. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, brought to you by Daily Bread Media, Extra Dough, episode 5. Let's go ahead and get on into it. So first thing I want to point out is that a Power 5 quarterback has won 9 of the last 11 trophies. 9 of the last 11. So when that's what we're looking at, the probability that a Power 5 quarterback is going to win this award is very high. And that makes sense because when you look at, like I said, who's dominating college football, I mean, Cincinnati, you had make it to the playoffs a year ago, and they didn't even have anyone get close to the Heisman Award, right? So it's not going to be anyone from the G5. A running back is pretty unlikely in this day and age, but it can happen. We saw it with some of the Alabama guys, right? Not too distant past. And then we saw Devontae Smith win the Heisman in 2020. So I do think wide receiver has a chance with this wide open passing systems, right? We're seeing that all over college football. Alabama now is throwing. All right, we saw an Alabama wide receiver win a Heisman, which seemed crazy not all that long ago. So with passing being so important, I think wide receivers have a better chance than normal, but overall, you're still looking at probably a quarterback, if not them, probably a wide receiver. Every other position, extremely, extremely unlikely, okay? So, let's get into it. Let's talk about... Just made my head real tiny there for a second. Let's talk about the favorite for the award, CJ Stroud, Ohio State quarterback. He is plus 200 to win the award. He's the favorite. When I first started looking at the Heisman odds in the offseason, he was plus 400, so his odds have been cut in half. I think that was smart. When I saw him at plus 400, I remember saying, I don't see any reason why CJ Stroud would be below Bryce Young, and now he's ahead of Bryce Young. So we'll talk about that. But obviously the concerns when you're looking at CJ Stroud, they lose their first 2 wide receivers, right? 2 first-round wide receivers. Most programs, you lose that and you say, they're cooked. There's no way. By now, we know what it is with Ohio State. They're going to reload. You have Jackson Smith and Jigba back. We'll talk more about him later, but he was one of the stars of college football. He's back. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. back, going to have an absolutely huge breakout season. And you have Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, to name other. You know, there's a lot of names in that room. The way they've been recruiting, long story short, they're not going to take a step back. They average 45 points per game, the top scoring offense in the nation. CJ Stroud, he just got better as the year went on. He developed very, very quickly. You'll recall, it seems like a long time ago. It really wasn't that long ago. You will recall, people were calling for CJ Stroud to lose his job, talking about how terrible he was playing at the beginning of the year with some of his overthrows. They were knocking on the table, pounding on the table for Jack Miller or Quinn Ewers to start a game over him. Ridiculous. What did he do? He threw for over 4,500 yards, had 45 touchdowns. Rose Bowl victory. We saw what he did in the Rose Bowl over Utah. It was a thing of beauty. I'll say this about CJ Stroud. I think he deserves to be the favorite. I don't really think there's any value in laying plus 200. I don't think those odds are good enough, right? But I think he deserves to be the favorite. I did like him when he was plus 400. I did recommend that previously. But now I don't see much value in this price, mainly because he's going to have to compete with his teammates, right? You have Travion Henderson. His running back had a huge freshman year, might be the best running back in college football. We'll talk about some of the other options for that mantle later. And you obviously have Jackson Smith and Jigma. So that's my thoughts on CJ Stroud. His main competition, Mr. Bryce Young from Alabama, plus 350. First off, what you need to know about Bryce, well, he won the award last year. Became the first underclassman since Lamar Jackson in 2016 to win the Heisman. He's got an all-new receiving core, and that's one thing you would be worried about, right? Listing some of the negatives. They have to replace their top 3 guys. Of course, they still have a ton of talent in the room. Jermaine Burton is going to be a breakout star. But the returning production in the passing game, that's huge in college football. If you've ever paid attention to Bill Connolly, the S&P Plus scientist, so to speak, if you've ever paid attention to what he does, he'll point out statistically you can prove returning production in the passing game is huge. So obviously they return Bryce Young, but in the receiving game, they don't really return much else. And then the offensive line is also weak for Alabama standards. Both of the tackles have to be replaced. So, it's Alabama. I'm sure they're going to reload. All that being said, it's Bryce Young. It's Bryce Young. He won the award for a reason last year. He has some concerns that CJ Stroud just simply does not have. So while Stroud does have 2 other legitimate challengers on his own team to compete with, that might cannibalize that opportunity. Bryce really, in my opinion, only has one, and Will Anderson. He plays on the other side of the football. So, right, whether or not you consider Jahmyr Gibbs or Burton a legitimate shot for the award, their odds just simply are not as high as CJ Stroud's teammates' odds are, and I think that reflects some accuracy. So, overall, I think Bryce Young has a terrific shot for the award. If anything, now that he's getting plus 150 on the 150 cents from him and CJ Stroud, when Alabama should be the favorite to win it all, right? And of course, Ohio State's right there with them. But I think now it's like just take the guy with a higher odds, because Bryce Young's a stud. He's going to be a stud once again. We know this is true. There has only been one repeat winner in the history of the Heisman Award. That was Ohio State's Archie Griffin in 1974 and 1975. And that was quite a while ago. So we could see why maybe Bryce isn't the overwhelming favorite, but still has pretty darn good chance. All right, Caleb Williams, quarterback from USC. He's plus 850. He transferred in with Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma. He made that switch. Obviously, we saw what he could do last year when he stole the starting quarterback job from Spencer Rattler, who was, a preseason. A lot of times these picks can look dumb in retrospect, right? Spencer Rattler would have been on this list if we made this video a year ago. But he's Lincoln Riley's quarterback. He's been handpicked, moved with him to Southern California, right? And Lincoln Riley's had a few Heisman quarterbacks in his day already, in case you haven't noticed. So he's going to put up huge stats. He's going to have great weapons at his disposal. Mario Williams, Jordan Addison, we'll talk more about later. On and on and on, right? Kyle Ford, Gary Bryant. It's a loaded room. This kid has a cannon of an arm, and he's very special running the ball. That's the most, that's the best attribute he has. So he's going to put up huge numbers. But that's not all that it takes to win a Heisman. So why are his odds below the other two? It's because USC was a bad football team a year ago. They were. They're going to be better this year. We know that. But they're nowhere near as good of a team as Alabama or Ohio State. Not even close. You lined up them against Alabama tomorrow. I think Alabama crushes them by at least 20 points. And I don't think that's crazy to say whatsoever. Ohio State would drop. We saw what they did to Utah in the Rose Bowl, how many points they dropped, right? And this team, I don't think is as good as USC. So anyway, they're not at that caliber. They could compete for the playoffs. They could win the Pac-12. The odds reflect they should. I don't really think those odds are accurate, personally, in my opinion. I think the defense is going to be so bad and the offensive line is such a concern that I think that's going to hold back Caleb Williams. But the stats are going to be such that he does have a chance, and if USC does take over the Pac-12, because the conference is kind of there for tanking, it's there for taking. Even though I'm big on Utah, it's not like there's a dominant force in the conference. So I think he does have a legitimate shot. I do like these odds. One concern would be that the Pac-12, the last winner they had for the award, that was Marcus Mariota with Oregon back in 2014. So there aren't a lot of eyeballs on this conference, right? But one takeaway you can have is that, Lincoln Riley, he should help. That's one reason this move was so big. Him moving to Southern California is so big for the conference, is that it should bring more eyeballs, right? More people should be interested in the product out there. All right, next up you have Bijan Robinson, running back for Texas. He's plus 1,600 to win the award. He has the highest odds of any non-quarterback, and that's my first knock on him, right? He's not a quarterback. 9 of the last 11 winners have been Power 5 quarterbacks. He also has people on his own team to compete with. He has Quinn Ewers as quarterback, we'll talk about next. Well, he has Xavier Worthy, a wide receiver, who is a dark horse for the award, right? Some other concerns, I mean, Texas was bad a year ago. They lost to Kansas, okay? They're going to be better. They're going to put up a lot of points. But thinking a running back, and he could put up ungodly stats. I mean, Bijan Robinson I think he's the most talented running back in college football. In an offense with this much firepower, he could put up ungodly stats. But in my opinion, even if he does that, is Texas going to make the college football playoffs? I mean, I don't think so. I think the price is just driven up here from him playing on Texas. Same with some of his other Texas teammates. I think their price is just up there because they play on Texas, right? And while he is a fantastic player and will put up big-time stats, I don't think there's any value whatsoever on targeting a running back at that price. The 5th highest odds on the board is Quinn Ewers, plus 2,000. He runs out the top 5 for the award. Earlier this season, their betting odds, I haven't checked if they've changed, but earlier when I checked it, they were plus 5,000 to win the national championship. And to have 2 players within the top 5, I mean, this offense is going to score points, guys. But if you have 2 players within the top 5, that's more than Alabama has. That's more than Ohio State has. Unless you think they're like a surefire national championship, they should not have 2 players within the top 5. That is not an accurate reflection of their true odds whatsoever. I understand they have a chance for some signature wins in that they play Alabama week 2, but do you think they're going to be in Alabama week 2? I mean, I know I don't. If they do, sure, that'll help their Heisman case, but that's a huge, huge, huge if, and I do not like these odds whatsoever. I mean, Quinn Ewers is due for a big season. I think he will have a big season. He was one of the higher-rated recruits in 247's history, right at the quarterback position. He's up there. He has a cannon of an arm. It's going to be very fun to watch. Got some good weapons to throw the ball to. Big-time statistical season coming. Throwing to Isaiah Nair. Throwing to Xavier Worthy. Having Bijan Robinson there in the backfield. But, those odds, I mean, for sure a stay away from me. All right, now we're out of the top 5, so I'll kind of highlight some of the guys I like outside the top 5. And again, there's not a huge chance they're going to win this award, but guys I think have a legitimate chance to win the award because there's only, I don't know, at the very most 10 players I think have a legitimate chance at winning the award. It's probably more like maybe 8. So if I highlighted these guys, I think they have a real chance. So Tyler Van Dyke, the quarterback from Miami, he really burst onto the scene a year ago, man. He kind of came out of nowhere. I wasn't huge on him coming into the year, but, an injury for Derek King, Tyler Van Dyke steps up, and oh my God, did he step up. He had 6 straight games with 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. That hadn't been done since Joe Burrow, right? At the Power 5 level, that's just not something that you see. He checks all the boxes you're looking for. He plays in the Power 5. He's a quarterback. He's at Miami. And believe it or not, while it's kind of similar to USC's chances, right, in that it's not an Alabama chance where you expect it to happen, but the ACC is up there for the taking. If you watched episode 4 of Extra Dough, the ACC is kind of there for taking. Clemson has shown some vulnerabilities. The 3 best teams in the conference, in my opinion, 3 of my favorite teams in the conference, Clemson, NC State, and Wake Forest, they all play in the other side of the conference. So that opens up the door for Miami in year 1 under Mario Cristobal to make a run at the conference championship. Do I think they're going to do it? Again, it's a little bit more of a toss-up than these other teams, but you can see how the pathway is there. Tyler Van Dyke could work his way into first-round considerations for the NFL draft. If he has another big year, he will, and it'll be at Miami. They'll get that attention. They'll be in the ACC. You can see how things would start to fall in place. So my one hesitation here, right? Well, the main one is Miami might just not be good enough. The other one is production-wise. Mario Cristobal had Justin Herbert at Oregon, and he was a guy who was talked up as possibly a Heisman contender, and he just never really got all that close because, Cristobal in that offense kind of held him back a little bit. We'll see with Josh Gaddis as the new offensive coordinator. We'll see. But I don't think the statistics are going to quite be there for Tyler Van Dyke. So that's why I think I do kind of like his odds. I think he has a chance. I don't think the odds are accurately reflecting. I don't think there's any way he should be, longer odds than Quinn Ewers. But, Quinn Ewers is going to have a bigger statistical season. So that is key for the award. All right, Jackson Smith and Jigba, man. He was plus 5,000 earlier, a couple months ago, and he's really shot up, and I think that's accurate, man. He plays at Ohio State, so he checks that box. Even though he's not a quarterback, that's the obvious knock on him. We just saw Devontae Smith win the award in 2020 with Mac Jones as his QB, so we have that precedent. This kid had 95 receptions, 1,600 yards, and 9 touchdowns a year ago. Those are big-time stats. This kid is the real deal. I think he's the best wide receiver in college football. I think he could excel. CJ Stroud's obviously going to have a big season. So is their running back, Travion Henderson. But I think unless Henderson, gets like close to 2,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, which is possible, I think JSN's gonna really star this year. His numbers from a year ago are insane. You just can't cover this guy. We saw him in the Rose Bowl, one of the best performances I've ever seen in college football, quite frankly, right? No hyperbole at all. 15 catches, 347 yards, and 3 touchdowns in a game like that. I don't know. You expect defenses to focus in on him more, but good luck, right? These college defenders trying to focus on him. You got Marvin Harrison on the other side of the ball. You got a bunch of 5 stars you can throw out there in the slot. Good luck focusing too much on JSN is what I'll say. They vacate a ton of production. They vacate 2 first-rounders at the wide receiver position, right? Olave and Garrett Wilson combined for over 130 catches, close to 2,000 yards and 25 receiving touchdowns. That opens up a huge door. JSN could even have a bigger year, and he's so gosh darn talented. I tell you what, I would not be surprised if he has an even bigger year. So I do like those odds. If I'm betting any non-quarterback, I'm 100% targeting Jackson Smith and Jigma. Like I said, the plus 5,000 earlier in this offseason was great. I grabbed a little piece of that. I would grab a little bit more at plus 3,000 because that betting line, that's only going one direction. I'll tell you what. All right, next up, we have another similar one. We have Jordan Addison, wide receiver for USC. I have not seen any Heisman odds released. I was checking. I haven't seen them released since he made his transfer to USC. He's similar to Jackson Smith and Jigba in that there's a chance he could outshine Caleb Williams. The reason I find that a little more hard of a pathway is, like I said, Ohio State's going to have a better year than USC in all likelihood. Caleb Williams is going to add some with the rushing ability that CJ Stroud doesn't, right? So more likely to be cannibalized by Caleb Williams. And he was the main thing going in that Pitt offense. Not the only thing going. They had a great season a year ago, but now at USC, you have a lot of targets. You have Travis Dye, you have Williams rushing the ball. He just probably is going to take a slight step back statistically, I would forecast. So while I do think he's in for a big year, I think he would have to put on insane stats, and I'm just worried about the team. So a few more concerns with Addison. That's why I would like JSN quite a bit more than him. We'll see what the odds are when they're released. All right, and another guy I think has a legitimate chance. The only defender I would notice is Will Anderson Jr., edge rusher for Alabama. He should have been invited last year. It was a joke that he wasn't. He was the best defender in college football. I thought he was very clearly the best player in college football, and it just was kind of obvious watching the game. He was a dominant force. He will be again. He's going to have another big year. It's almost just a sure thing. It's hard for a defender to get that nod, and that's why I would find it extremely unlikely, right? What's it going to take for a defender to win the award? Plus, I think there's a real shot he's invited. I don't really know if I love his chances to win the award, is why I'm not going out of my way. I think JSN at the same price, I think he has a better chance at winning, but I actually do think there's there's a pretty high likelihood Will Anderson at least gets invited, like we saw Aiden Hutchinson get invited last year, right? And like I said, Will Anderson already had a way better year. He's probably going to have another better year than Aiden Hutchinson. So I don't know. On one hand, you can look at it, hey, I'm getting plus 3,000 for a guy I think will probably be invited to the ceremony, and that's a pretty good price if you think that is the case. So I wouldn't hate anyone taking a stab there at Will Anderson. I would almost never advise playing defenders, and that's why I haven't piled on anything myself, but I'm considering it just because of the likelihood, right? I don't think it's quite reflected in the odds. All right, last but not least, the last guy I'll talk about, the biggest long shot here on the board, that's Hendon Hooker, quarterback. Oh, let me go back a second there. Leave your name up there, sir. Yes, sir, Hendon Hooker. Man, he checks all the boxes. At plus 5,000, he's a Power 5 quarterback, check. And even that, he plays in the SEC, check. All right, big name conference, eyes on him. He's going to have his Heisman moment chances, right? I know you play against Bama and Georgia. You'll probably lose both of those games, and it probably sounds crazy to forecast, but I mean, I don't know. The Bama game was close for 3 quarters a year ago, and even if they do lose again, as long as he puts on a big show, like if he throws for like something crazy, like 400 yards and 4 touchdowns against one of those teams, I mean, you bet that every single person voting for the Heisman is going to have eyes on those games, because those Heisman voters, say what you will, they're not watching a whole lot of Pac-12 football. They just aren't, right? And even Big 12 to an extent, but they're watching the SEC. The last box he checks, and arguably the most important, his production is there, man. He threw for 3,500 yards and 36 touchdowns last year, leading that Josh Heupel offense. They averaged close to 40 points per game a season ago. That was a school record. Now with your second year in this scheme, you return a lot of productions. You do lose Velus Jones, right? But you return Cedric Tillman. Jalen Hyatt, everyone's talking about him as being a breakout star at wide receiver this year. He's a speedy guy. And you get Brew McCoy transferring in, which he's been in college forever and hasn't done much, but that he was once thought of as one of the better recruits in the country. You return 4 offensive line starters. So, I mean, I ask, could this offense be even better this year? I don't see why not. The main knock with Hooker, and it's a big knock, is that Tennessee's probably not going to be good enough. I mean, they're going to need to be better. They were only 7-6 a year ago, and they just lost a bowl game to Purdue. The defense is going to suck. That could be good and bad for Hooker's Heisman chances, though, because on one hand, it gives him more opportunity for shootouts, but on the other hand, it means he could be losing a game to some teams like to Purdue, like a season ago. So I'll be biting on Hendon Hooker at plus 5,000. Again, I think those odds are only going to move in one direction. So I would like that as well. So that wraps up Extra Dough, episode 5, Heisman betting odds. I think my favorite play on the board right now is JSN, even though he's a receiver. Jackson Smith and Jigma at plus 3,000. But I think anyone mentioned, I think has a legitimate chance at the award. The Texas guys, I'm personally steering clear of. I think CJ Stroud and Bryce Young are definitely the top 2 guys for a reason. I think that's smart, and I don't know if there's a ton of value on them. But I think I like JSN. I'm going to be throwing a little on Hooker. I'm going to be considering Anderson and Tyler Van Dyke as well. So I'm going to monitor that. There's still a way to go for the season, but I can only see the odds moving. Those guys I highlighted after the top 5, I can kind of only see their odds moving in one direction. Is why I wanted to point them out. So that concludes Extra Dough episode 5. I hope you've been enjoying these videos. I've been enjoying them, making them. Hopefully you're finding some useful information. Just talking college football. We'll see. We're going to keep expanding it. As we wrap up into the season, try to get us as informed as possible. I try to make these videos informative. I try not to have them go on too long. I can sit here on camera and talk for 3 hours. But it's not always that useful consuming, right? You want to shorten it down. So we'll see. Maybe going later on in the off season, maybe we'll do some live shows, something like that. Maybe we'll have some of the paid for play guys on. I kind of want to get their thoughts on some of their conferences, right? So we'll see. But other than that, we're going to keep hammering some conference odds. There's some team totals that have been released that I want to kind of take a deep dive on some of those, right? Not just, I like this one, I like that one. Really hammer out. What are they listed at? What are they returning in production, right? What are their stats from a year ago? Really take a deep dive on some that I like, because there's some lines reduced, that have been released, and they're going to move quickly. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on going forward, hammering out some more of that. But college football, it's not all that far away. The offseason is going to fly by. I just want to say a big time thank you to anyone listening out there. A big time thank you to all my listeners. Make sure you subscribe to the Daily Bread Media YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe at Yonkers CFB on Twitter. All my written stuff, anything I'm producing. I stay very busy covering college football. So anything like that, go ahead and check out there. USFL bets, third straight week. I went 3-1, so I always post an article there, usually on Thursday or Friday. Look for that to drop last regular season week coming up for that. And make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, man, as well. I'm hoping to keep coming out with stuff like that. Once it's the season for Extra Dough, I'm really excited. We're gonna be covering the DFS slates for college football. We cover it better than anyone else out there does for free. It's gonna be something you want to be listening to. These offseason primers. It's more to fill the void. It's more to find little gaps. But the college football DFS stuff and prop betting, that's when it gets serious during the season. So other than that, that's episode 5, Heisman betting odds. And stay tuned next week for episode 6.